Within recent years, disasters of all types and description have devastated just about every section of the country. Earthquakes in California, hurricanes in Florida, unprecedented flooding in the Midwest, tornadoes rip through the Southwest, and bone-chilling blizzards shut down the northern border states. These and other almost annual disasters remind us of the need for personal preparedness. These are facts of life. But could there be a new menace on the horizon? A man-made calamity so pervasive it threatens not only the United States, but the entire world?
The year 2000 computer problem is, without question, the most complex, most expensive problem mankind has ever faced.
There are some Y2K analysts out there that are saying we need to be preparing for the doomsday scenario, and they may be right.
My biggest concern is the potential there is for panic, because people that are panicked will generally make the wrong decisions.
Can your family survive if you're on your own?
Food, water, and shelter. If you cover those, everything else is secondary, but those are the primary ones you've got to address.
Is it possible that even the agencies that normally provide disaster relief could themselves be paralyzed?
I believe Y2K could throw the American medical system into gridlock. Therefore, I think you need to have some backup systems.
Could the Y2K computer bug be the cataclysmic event that forces all of us to discover just how prepared we really are?
The truth is, no one really knows how bad it's going to be, and it's really not about trying to predict the future with accuracy, it's about risk management. What we need to be asking ourselves is, how bad could it be, and are we prepared if that happens?
We have fire insurance on our homes, not because we expect a fire, but it's just prudent to be prepared in case there is one.
Will you be ready, or will you be sorry you didn't act in time? The new year is rapidly approaching, but this will be a New Year's Eve like no other. It is not only the end of a year, it is the end of a century, the beginning of a new millennium. A millennium charged with foreboding warnings of unprecedented disaster. We are promised an age of ever-increasing earthquakes, of massive floods and the stars falling from the sky, of wars and rumors of wars, and a time of trouble greater than any since there was a nation. Now, in addition to all of that, comes Y2K. Could it be that the time of trouble is of our own making? By now, most people have heard of Y2K, the anagram shorthand for the year 2000 computer problem. Americans have proven they can handle even the most devastating natural disaster. But can we survive a man-made, technological meltdown?
I believe we will have the declaration of a national emergency. I think we'll have martial law by this time next year. I don't think there will be New Year's Eve celebrations like we have seen them in the past, because I think there will be troops in the street.
Could it be that civilization as we know it could be on the brink of the greatest man-made disaster in history? Many experts believe that is a distinct possibility. But how could such a thing come about? Have we become so dependent on computers that our society is at risk if they fail? The fact is, during the past 30 years, computers have taken over virtually every aspect of modern life. Each of these items, and hundreds more, are all controlled by a computer-based system called an embedded chip. The truth is, it would be hard to find a modern appliance of any kind that wasn't computer-enhanced in some way. If you drive a fairly new automobile, there are probably more electronics in it than there was in the first moon lander. And a good portion of that electronic wizardry is date-sensitive. Therein lies the problem. For over 4 decades, computers have been constructed with date information that becomes invalid. Midnight, December 31st, 1999. But if everyone knows what the problem is, why not just fix it? That's exactly what they're trying to do. But consider the scope of the problem. Over 400 million lines of outdated and undocumented code. Over 70 billion, that's billion embedded chips. At least 250 million PCs, and all of them. Every chip, every line of code, every computer will have to be tested, because computers, bless their mindless little electronic hearts, will not operate with conflicting data. Some of you will undoubtedly think, that's no big deal. Let's consider one example. Computers and embedded chips keep the electronic power grid operating smoothly, providing electrical power to a network distribution system that gives all of us the electricity we need at the flip of a switch. But suppose a computer suddenly receives a code it cannot understand. Unable to interpret the data, it shuts down, and the power is shut off everywhere. Not just in your town or even your state, but everywhere. The massive disruption to society and our way of life would be hard to overstate. Rest assured, government and industry are doing everything they can to fix the problem. But in the event they don't make it, is there anything you can do? Actually, there is. And that's what this show is all about. You can be prepared. And rather than just continue to rush on toward the electronic iceberg we know is out there without knowing what to do or how to do it, we've gathered together some of the nation's leading experts in the field of preparedness. If you listen carefully to what they have to say, maybe none of us will have to go down with the ship. Without stretching the analogy too far, now that we have some understanding of the problem, let's meet some of our experts and begin to prepare our personal lifeboat.
In preparing for Y2K, consumers are being told a lot of things that they've got to do. But I really boil it down to what I call the essential three: food, water, and shelter. If you cover those, everything else is secondary, but those are the primary ones you've got to address.
When I'm asked, how can I prepare for Y2K, the first thing I tell people is that they need to take an inventory of their risks and their resources, and from there, formulate an action plan.
Well, I think the most important thing above all is not to treat Y2K as something to panic about. We should be thinking about Y2K and preparing for Y2K as we would for a natural disaster.
Stick to the basics and maintain a rational perspective. That advice certainly gives us a starting point. But there's also a spiritual aspect to all of this.
The Bible has a verse in it that's so important that it occurs twice. The book of Proverbs 27:3 and 27:12 essentially says that the prudent man sees trouble coming and takes action. The foolish man keeps going and suffers for it. The Bible calls us to diligence.
The first thing we have to realize is that this problem is entirely man-made. Tens of thousands of computer programmers worked very hard to create this situation. But since it is man-made, it is also manageable if you have a plan. Taken as one big lump, the problem seems insurmountable. But if we look at what may or may not affect each of us individually, and the resources available to cope with disruptions, shortages, and other assorted difficulties, we discover that preparedness is not only possible, it's smart. So what are the most critical things that face us?
My major concerns would be electricity, which is the bedrock of our modern civilization, and that keeps our water clean and so on and so forth. And then the second would be water, our food, our delivery of food, and then fourth would be our financial or our banking system. I mean, we are a nation that without money would be a kind of a difficult place to live in. But my biggest concern is the potential there is for panic, because people that are panicked will generally make the wrong decisions.
Some experts believe that panic could cause more problems than the problem itself. But the person who is prepared, of course, has no need to panic. Still, when everything you've learned to rely on suddenly isn't there, you're required to decide what's really important. And that brings us back to basics. Food, water, shelter, and for many people, medical supplies. Let's look at each of these items individually, beginning with the most essential commodity, water. 2/3 of the Earth's surface is water. Yet in an emergency, a consistent, safe supply of usable water may be your single most important need. If the water treatment plants shut down, if the pumps can no longer bring the water to the faucets in your home, neighborhood, or community, what will you do?
The doctors tell us we can live up to 40 days without food, but only about 3 days without water. So our number one mission-critical system is making sure we have adequate supplies of drinking water. And by that, as a bare minimum, we need at least 1 gallon, preferably 2 gallons a day per person.
So the amount of water you want to store will depend on how many people are in your family. And keep in mind, you'll need some water for cooking and cleaning.
Everyone should have 14 gallons of water stored within their living area and then have a device to be able to treat the water they can find. 14 gallons of water, 1 gallon a day for 2 weeks. Do the math. 28 gallons for husband and wife, or for a couple, and etc. It's so simple. Anyone can do it. The neat thing about it is it's not expensive, but it's so practical and so prudent to be prepared for water. It's an absolute basic.
Water's a critical resource. All of us need it. 3 to 5 days without it and we're dead. Again, people can store it incrementally. My family started by taking the 2-liter Coke bottles, rinsing them out, refilling them with tap water, and putting 4 drops of Clorox in them, screwing them tight, putting them in a dark place, and stockpiling them incrementally as we went along.
One of the best ways to store water is to do it a little at a time. Instead of purchasing cans of soda, buy your favorite drink in the 2-liter bottles. Clean them thoroughly after use, then fill them with tap water and replace the twist-on lid tightly. Just about all the tap water in America is highly processed and chlorinated before it gets to your house. But since you don't know how long the stored water will have to last, adding 2 or 3 drops of Clorox to each container isn't a bad idea. Also, fill the bottle right to the top. The less air in the bottle, the less chance of contamination. And by the way, the gallon juice containers are excellent for water storage. They are in fact designed to hold liquids for extended periods. The next question, of course, is where do you store it?
Let's go over some practical steps for the average person in their home. Your home has a number of reservoirs that you don't even realize you have. Sinks, bathtubs, water heaters. The average home in America has a 40-gallon water heater. If you have a family of 4, your water heater now represents 10 days worth of potable drinking water.
Finding the space to store water may be easier than you think. Try taking a quick inventory of unused space in your home. In the back of closets, underneath the bed, the shelves in the garage where you've been saving empty boxes. All make excellent water storage areas. One other thing. In some areas, a nearby stream may afford a reliable source of water. But keep in mind that even if your grandmother got all her water from a stream, your intestinal system has built up different immunities, and quite likely the stream contains different impurities. Keep Clorox, iodine crystals, or water purification tablets on hand and treat all natural water before consuming it, because even boiling may not be a viable option. Remember,
everybody has to drink water. Everyone should have 14 gallons of water, a gallon a day for 2 weeks. It's an absolute basic.
that brings us to the second of the most important basic needs items, food. But just having something that says food on the label may not be enough. Nobody wants to go hungry if they can help it, so storing food is a major priority. But just like storing water, there are a few things you need to know to store food successfully.
The second most important thing we need to have stored is food in whatever increment of time that we can afford. Some people can only afford another day, an extra week, some maybe a month or two, or up to a year. People should be able to produce food at home, whether it's canning, freezing, bottling, growing their own food, producing their own food in the backyard, canning it at a local cannery or whatever. But food is so important, obviously, to our long-term life. And the rule for being prepared for having enough food to live on is to store what you normally eat. Eat what you store and use it or lose it.
When it comes to food, people really need to be stockpiling now. And they need to do it incrementally. It may be as simple as going to the grocery store, throwing a few extra canned goods into the shopping cart, and beginning to stockpile that in advance of January the 1st, 2000.
Let's say your average family shopping list consists of 2 pounds of beans, 2 pounds of rice, and 2 pounds of pasta every week, just theoretically. Well, next week, instead of buying 2 pounds of beans, buy 3 pounds of beans, 2 pounds of pasta, 2 pounds of rice, and put the extra pound away as storage. Then the next week, buy an extra pound of rice. The next week, buy an extra pound of pasta. Then start to buy some canned goods. And you'll be surprised within the next 5 to 6 months how much extra food you will have put away in your pantry.
That sounds like a relatively painless and prudent thing to do, but will your friends accuse you of hoarding?
Sometimes people wonder if stockpiling food is the same as hoarding food. Stockpiling is what we do when we have a lot of resources and there's a very small demand. Hoarding is what happens when we've got a lot of demand and very few resources. In fact, hoarding is what happens to people who don't stockpile. So I encourage people to stockpile now.
Some of the weird things that I've heard and experienced in this industry are people who will rush out and buy a year's supply of dried foods, against which I have no feelings. I have a lot of it myself. but they rush out and buy a year's supply of dried foods they've never tasted before, have no clue as to how to fix, and they're going to put it in their basement for 15 years hoping that they never need it. That's one weird thing I'd urge people not to do. Don't buy anything you haven't tried. Don't buy anything you're not willing to assimilate into your diet as soon as you buy it.
It's important to make your choices now, while you are in control of the situation. If you delay or just flat out avoid making the hard decisions, someone else is likely to make them for you. There aren't many rules to follow when it comes to food storage, but it's good to know what rules there are, because not knowing or not following the rules could cost you your life. Let me illustrate rule number 1 with a true story. In the winter of 1983-84 in Utah, record snowfall drove the deer herds down out of the mountains and literally into people's backyards searching for food. Well-meaning farmers and conservationists put out hundreds of bales of hay for the animals, which they quickly devoured. But the people were shocked when the deer literally starved to death with their bellies full of hay. The animals were used to feeding on oak, maple, and bitterbush. Their systems simply couldn't process the hay. Rule number 1, don't buy what you don't eat, or what you are unwilling to work into your regular meals. If you choose to buy dehydrated or freeze-dried foods, for example, start working these foods into your regular diet immediately. If you are unwilling to do that, don't make them part of your storage program. Rule number 2, remind yourself that you don't have to do it all at once. All you have to do is begin and continue from there. Rule number 3, know what you must have for a week, a month, a year. Just buying stuff is a waste of goods and money. Finding out what you need as opposed to what you think you want will take a little study, but it's worth it. Rule number 4 is simply do it now. That doesn't mean rush out to the store and fill up the back of the van. It simply means begin to implement your plan today and to build your own personal in-home convenience store incrementally. And once you have what you need, begin a program of use and replace. Use the things in your storage for your meals and shop to replace what you use. But even if your food storage is adequate and in place, if there's an extended power outage, you face a whole new set of problems. Will you have an alternate source of light? And what should that be? Do you know where to go for a safe alternative to heating your home if there's no fuel for your furnace and no electricity to turn the fan? How will you get information? What about stores and banks? Can you protect your financial situation? What else should you know before the lights go out?
We don't really need electricity. What we really need is heat and light.
Find out when we come back. Of all the services that Americans take for granted, a clean, efficient, uninterrupted supply of electrical power leads the list. Unfortunately, the electric power that fuels just about every other utility service we enjoy is also the most vulnerable to disruption. What can we do if the power grid fails?
In regards to the power grid, people talk about how resilient it is in the industry, but the power grid is not nearly as resilient as people think it is. The Achilles heel of the power grid is telecommunications. We've got 150 control centers across the country where they go in and negotiate who's going to have power, how much they're going to have, when they're going to turn it on, when they're going to turn it off, that type of thing. Without telecommunications, the power grid will go down with a mighty thud.
January the 1st, 2000, in many parts of the world will come in the dead of winter. And if people don't have a backup plan, if the electricity goes out, a way to keep their family warm, they're going to be in real trouble. And people have got to think through that very carefully between now and then. In the absence of electrical power, the best way to keep your family warm is probably a wood-burning stove. If you can't afford that, then a kerosene space heater. If you can't even afford those, then at the very least get adequate clothing, even sleeping bags and blankets, and that'll keep you warm. You may not be very comfortable, but you'll get through it.
The status of the power grid should be of particular concern to all of us, since so much of the infrastructure of the nation depends on it. The question is fairly asked, can we survive a major, long-term power shutdown?
You want to have all those things with which you would stay warm in a winter where there may be no electric power. If the utilities go down, you want to have a wood stove. You want to have a backup generator if possible. You want to have flashlights. You want to have candles. You want to have kerosene lamps. You want to have blankets. You want to have warm clothes.
If there are failures in utilities, the protection for that is to be sure that you've got a backup source of heat and light. You know, we don't really need electricity. What we really need is heat and light. So some candles and some extra firewood or a camp stove or a gas grill, those kinds of things can solve those problems for you.
It's easy to agree that a backup for heat and lights is a good idea, but not every option is available to every family. Is there a way to determine what's best for you? And shouldn't we be exploring these options now, rather than when it's 30 below zero?
When this particular problem could occur is going to be in January, not in the middle of summer when it could be pleasant and people might take it in stride. What we're going to see is maybe it'll occur during a time when we're actually facing a deep freeze kind of condition here in Colorado or Minnesota. So to respond to these kind of problems, people are looking at what do I do to take care of my heating and lighting under those kind of conditions. So what they're doing is evaluating what kind of, say, solar options or wind options or generator options might be the most appropriate, and how do they go about getting those options put in place.
But wait a minute, we're talking about a sizable investment. What if we never really need a backup generator?
We have fire insurance on our homes, not because we expect a fire, but it's just prudent to be prepared in case there is one. In that same spirit, we need to think through carefully, what are we going to do if, in fact, we don't have power? And not just for a few hours, but maybe it's days or weeks.
The vast majority of Americans are totally dependent on electrical power supplied by various utility companies, virtually all of which are tied to the national power grid. A personal power generator can provide a limited amount of power for a limited time, but care should be taken. Generators can be expensive, temperamental, and noisy. The power itself is usually not clean. That means it induces spikes and surges that can damage most modern equipment. Then there's the matter of fuel. Stored in large quantities, these fuels can be hazardous. Gasoline does not store well over the long term, and diesel fuel is particularly vulnerable to cold temperatures. Propane is probably the best choice, but it will require a rather large capacity tank to be of much use. In any case, know the risks and what you can expect to operate with a generator before you invest in one. Low-tech solutions such as wood-burning stoves, kerosene heaters, and propane lanterns, cook stoves, and refrigerators may prove to be a safer and more manageable alternative. And no matter what happens, they're a good insurance policy. As Jim Lord said, we really don't need electricity. What we need is heat and light. Is electricity the only way to get those things?
Emergency lighting and emergency heating you can do for as little as $1, or you can do for as much as hundreds of thousands of dollars. So how do I work within my budget to make sure that I can keep my house warm and keep some source of light? Your number one way to produce light at the lowest amount of cost is a candle. The only problem with a candle is you have an increased chance of potential fire. So if you use candles, make sure you use safety candles and do them within containers, glass containers like a lantern. In the case of heat, a lot of ways you can do it. Many areas of the country that homes are equipped with wood-burning stoves or fireplaces, and just cut a couple extra cords of wood. You can also buy cans of Sterno, little cans that you put under chafing dishes. You'd be surprised the heat that a little can of Sterno will give off.
The fact is, many Americans already have a lot of the tools they'll need to keep going in an emergency. The trick is to put them to a little different use.
The neat thing about Americans is we love to camp. Most of us have sleeping blankets, a stove, a lantern. We have many of the tools that a person needs to be able to camp out within the walls of their home. What a refreshing idea. A convenience store in your own home where you have all the wonderful stuff that you'd like to eat, that you normally eat, the comfort foods, the candies, the whatever that you're used to having. You have them at home. Plus, you now have a camp stove, a camp lantern, and just learn how to camp out within the walls of your home for as long as you have to.
Another of the key elements in any preparedness program is financial planning. As in all areas of personal and family well-being, the time to make decisions is before the crisis hits. But what is the prudent thing to do? Can we rely on the financial institutions?
Well, in Y2K, you have to remember what money is all about, and I think it's important to get the goods that you need for Y2K before you concentrate on the medium of exchange to buy those goods. Such goods that will be in short supply and necessary for survival would be, for example, food, water, water filters, tools, spare parts for your tractor or your truck, warm clothing, medicine, things like that. Once you've stocked up on basic supplies of these necessary items, then I think you can move into the medium of exchange, which would be cash, junk silver, and then gold.
What we recommend for some financial concerns is, of course, preparedness. If you have done really good preparedness and you stocked up on food and water and perhaps paid some of your bills in advance, you are less likely to need to go to the bank during the height of the crisis. And then after a certain period of time, most of the financial systems should be back up again.
To protect yourself from really significant disruptions in the financial system, what I suggest people do is to have some cash set aside. I recommend about 3 months' living expenses in the form of cash. I recommend a similar amount in gold and silver coins. And if Y2K ends up not being a very serious problem after all, then throw a party. Now, you haven't lost anything if you've got cash and gold and silver. So that is a solution for any kind of economic calamity. That'll protect you against anything that might happen.
Given the state of computer art in the world today, most financial transactions are bits and bytes, flying through the ether or embedded in silicon in a computer somewhere. So what can we do about that?
The Y2K crisis will affect the financial community most of all. It is important to gain permanent paper financial records in the fall of 1999 of your important financial transactions, bank accounts, real estate records. Any type of legal transaction or financial record should be acquired and put in your year 2000 file. The provision of a few $1,000s, enough money to buy food, gas, walk-around money during that period would make a great deal of difference in minimizing the disruptions in the year 2000.
The experts all agree that each of us should have a certain amount of cash on hand, as well as some gold and silver if possible. And it's also essential to have a hard copy of all important financial documents in your personal file. Is there anything else?
When you're talking about economic uncertainty, the #1 rule is diversification. Don't do any one thing with your money. Put a little in each area. There's a great amount of wisdom when you talk about diversification in assets. Regardless what happens during Y2K, your money's going to make it through to the other side.
And what of the other institutions we've come to take for granted over the years? Hospitals, for example, and the healthcare system in general. If emergency services are no longer available, will you be able to care for your family's needs?
Y2K could throw the American medical system into gridlock. Therefore, I think you need to have some backup systems.
Do you know how to build or buy a complete home medical emergency kit? What items do you want to make sure you have? More importantly, perhaps, will you know how to use what's there in the case of a medical emergency? You may be more capable than you think you are. Learn more when we come back. Financial needs are important, but they will quickly fade into the background if we lack the health and strength to keep going.
A lot of people overlook the fact that one of the most important things that they can put aside is medical supplies. For instance, people with special needs like diabetics need to make sure that they acquire adequate supplies of insulin, for instance, to take care of them for several months.
One of the important things for those of us who have medication, who have prescribed medications we have to take in order to maintain our life and our lifestyle is somewhat difficult to handle because you can get about a month's prescription if you're under managed care. I would suggest to everyone that they go to their doctor and indicate to them that if their life depends on that medication, they'd like to have an extended prescription period. They may have to pay for it out of their pocket, but they have a right, indeed they have an obligation to themselves and to their family to ask for extended prescriptions. You may have to fight for them, you may have to threaten. You certainly may have to beg in some cases in order to make that happen, but if you live on prescription medication, I would make sure you had 3 to 6 months of it at least, so while the system is getting itself back together.
I believe Y2K could throw the American medical system into gridlock. Therefore, I think you need to have some backup systems. If you believe in alternate medicine, you may want to try herbal medicine. You want to know first aid. You want to have a number of first aid kits and remedies around. I think you need to think in terms of what happens if the medical system goes into gridlock and you simply can't not depend upon it in the crisis.
When I say that there are a possibility of disruptions in critical goods and services, medicine is one of the most important of those. If you're dependent upon some sort of prescription medicine for your well-being or even for your life, you must have a backup of those.
Here again, the problem has international implications, and it's simply the smart thing to do, to find out as much as you can about your particular need.
When it comes to Y2K and medicine, understand that if we have the kinds of disruptions that are projected, those that are dependent on daily or weekly medicine treatments must take steps now to stockpile those with their doctors. This is a very difficult problem. Half the insulin in the world is made in Denmark. Under Y2K conditions, it might be very difficult for those supplies to reach the people that need them. These are plans that need to be made well in advance, and that's a crucial area for many people in this country.
If we have a problem with healthcare or emergency services, we are going to need to be able to take care of ourselves for a short period of time. So we are strongly recommending that everyone take, at the minimum, a first aid course, CPR course if they can, take a more advanced course, and of course have a very well-stocked first aid kit and know how to use it.
Emergency medical supplies are obviously just that. They're for an emergency. A lot of the emergency rooms might not be functioning, or they might be overloaded. So put together a medical kit. What should that medical kit have? Well, all the basics like aspirin and pain relievers that you can buy over the counter. You want to have in that emergency medical kit antihistamines in case you have allergic reactions to things, bandages, gauze, hydrogen peroxide, alcohol, those type of things. You'd be surprised what you can do in an emergency situation, but you can't do it unless you have the equipment to do it with. So put together an emergency medical kit. Once again, let's say Y2K blows over. What's the worst that happens? You have something in your home that you should have had anyway.
The warning is clear. If you have a serious medical problem, take steps now to obtain the medication you are likely to need in case of a major disruption of services. And if you don't have a serious medical problem, take steps now to avoid getting one. Put together your own family emergency medical kit. And remember, being prepared medically includes being prepared mentally. Know what you can do with what you have. There are a number of other things still to be discussed, like that old car your son's been working on that you've threatened to have towed away. Could it have unexpected value?
The auto manufacturers are not guaranteeing the performance of any car built after 1981.
And speaking of work, what about your job? What do you do if there's no convenient or safe way to get to the job? What can you, your neighbors, and your community do to ease the impact of Y2K? Some final thoughts in a moment. We've pretty much covered the basics, the need for food, water, shelter, and medical supplies. But what about the convenience items? Things you can live without, but you'd really rather not. Should we even be concerned with creature comforts and a preparedness plan?
Y2K can be a tough time, and without personal hygiene items, it could be even tougher. So let's make sure that we put aside adequate personal hygiene items like toilet paper and toothpaste and things like that.
Patent medicines that you need for allergies, hay fever, those kinds of things. Buy an extra bottle. The wonderful thing about America and its drugstores and its grocery stores and its convenience stores is that if you buy some, tomorrow morning there'll be some more back in a box from the warehouse. This will not be the case when there are no computers tracking that when there is no delivery system, when there are no trucks with fuel to deliver them. Everything is going to get extended. So now is the time.
In point of fact, knowing how long this whole thing might last is one of the biggest question marks of the Y2K scenario. Someone once said, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. We can do all we can for ourselves and our families, but we must also encourage local government officials to get involved in the emergency planning process as well.
Communities have to prepare themselves for the kinds of problems that are going to happen with Y2K. It's one of the strongest messages that I carry out to people. Turn to your community. It's at least as important to get your community prepared as it is to get yourself prepared and your family prepared.
Local community leaders need to be working together now and planning together with contingency plans that will cover any potential emergency that arises from Y2K, from the distribution of medicine, the distribution of food, the creation of any refugee facilities of people who may be coming out of other cities, the care of new diseases that may pop up in the community. There are many things that community leaders, and only community leaders, can make plans for and make provisions for.
There is no substitute for government entitlements. If Social Security shuts down, if military pensions don't work, if benefit programs don't work, transfer payments don't work, there is nothing to substitute for those. What that means is, and I'll go right back to what I said before, it's going to be up to communities to protect people that are dependent upon that money coming in from the government. There is no other strategy you can take but to get your community prepared and to put yourself in a position to manage your life if those things disappear from it.
There's a real good chance that emergency services will not be available in the first part of 2000. So it's very important to make sure that you have firefighting supplies, for instance, because we may not have our firefighters out to help us. One of the things that we've found is that very few families have any kind of emergency plan whatsoever. And even without Y2K, having an emergency plan in case your house caught on fire is important to know.
All right, we're beginning to get an idea of what needs to be done. But whose job is it to see that everything's in place?
Y2K is something that families need to address together. Up to this point, because it's computers and it's technological, for the most part, women have not had a big involvement in it on the family level, and that's crucial for it to be fixed around the country. You know, it's kind of a Mars thing. It has to do with computers and time and dates and all of this, and yet for it to really be fixed in a family, it has to be addressed by the nurturing and mothering side. And that's a Venus thing, and this has got to be brought together somehow to help families get through this Y2K event.
Another of the community services that has become second nature to most people, but is now placed in serious jeopardy by Y2K, is the highly complex communications system. Because this system is privately owned and operated, it functions somewhat independently of other services, but the system requires clean, uninterrupted power. Communications also means our ability to receive important information. Radio stations have always been the country's first line of defense against a news blackout, but their sources of information, as well as their ability to keep operating, are also in question.
There are folks who suggest you get a radio for listening to radio stations. I don't know how long they'll be on the air, but I suspect that shortwave would be a great way of hearing. But we're counting on those folks having the ability to output. Having a device that will accept the input is a very cheap maneuver. You just buy a product that will bring in the sounds you're used to hearing. Whether or not they're on the air is dependent upon the system. Who can guess? If the grid goes down, forget it. None of that stuff is going to work. Then we're off the air.
There are a few additional things you might want to include in your preparedness planning, even though they're not right at the top of the list. Transportation, for example.
Solutions for transportation are going to have to take place at a local level. Bicycles, those kinds of solutions are really the only kinds of things we have available to us.
If you're thinking about getting rid of your old model car, a pre-1980 car, you better hang on to it because it may be the only car you have that works. The auto manufacturers are not guaranteeing the performance of any car built after 1981.
If major transportation goes down and stays down, I want to have means of backup transportation, especially if I can't get gasoline or diesel oil. That could be a bicycle, it could be a moped, it could be a motorcycle, some form of backup transportation. In England, they're already the government is telling people that they should have bicycles to get to work early in the year 2000.
Of course, we haven't covered everything. Attitude, for example, is extremely important. Just keep in mind that people have gotten through problems much worse than even the worst-case scenario anticipated for Y2K. But in the final analysis, your level of misery in any disaster situation is largely up to you. You can ignore the whole thing and wait to see if there really is going to be a problem. Or you can begin now to devise a preparedness plan for your family. There's still time to put together the basic items you'll need, to weather any storm, natural or man-made. No matter how serious the problem, chances are it will be solved and we'll all get back to building productive lives. Maintaining a proper perspective is probably as important to your well-being as an adequate water supply. Don't suffer from fear along with everything else. After all is said and done, the person who is truly prepared has nothing to fear.